They work Ilan of Adam Kadmon, BSB Cod.Hebraptors 450, was described by Chajes as the most ambitious and excessive artifact created by Hammerschlag. It is not merely a diagram, it is a visual symphony of the universe according to Luria, where the body of Adam Kadmon becomes a map of the divine process of emanation, the flow of infinite light, or Ein Sof, that contracts, filters, and is restored through the act of tikkun. The Ilan brings together text and image in a spiraling symbolic structure, references to the disciples of Luria, Israel Saruk, Moshe Zakuto, Chaim Vital, Menachem Zema, and Popper, and an almost magical intention to compose all the writings of our master Isaac Luria into a single unified vision. Poetically speaking, Hammerschlag's Ilan of Adam Kadmon is like a mirror of the cosmos before language, an attempt to visualize divinity in motion, the breath of God becoming form. Every line and every letter functions like an energy circuit channels through which divine consciousness flows before becoming world, time, or soul. The manuscript drew me into its world. Dated to 1691, it was completed when Nosen was 67 years old. The rotulus, the scroll itself, is colorful enough to have attracted the attention of scholars of Jewish art. It is therefore no surprise that they found it completely incomprehensible. Today, the Ilan is preserved in the Bavarian State Library in Munich. It belongs to a group of Kabbalistic manuscripts transferred to Munich in 1804 from the Court Library of Mannheim. These manuscripts most likely originated in the library of Christian August, Count Palatine of Sulzbach, when one of his successors, Karl Theodor, became Elector Palatine in Mannheim in 1742. Christian August was the patron of Knorr. Sulzbach was the place where the first volume of Kabbalah Denudata was published, along with many other important Hebrew works. A second Ilan, drawn by Hammerschlag, almost certainly from the same period, is also preserved in Munich. Titled Ilan Dikduk HaTorah, the Tree of the Grammar of the Torah, it is a Kabbalistic diagram devoted to the grammatical visualization of Hebrew. The exuberant Ilan of Adam Kadmon underwent a long gestation period, as one would expect given the cost of its materials and the scale of the effort involved in its execution. In 1684, Hammerschlag had already completed a preparatory codex, much of which would later be copied onto parchment to create his masterpiece. That codex contains wonders of its own, including a remarkable inscribed fold-out tongue, a pop-up element that defies photographic reproduction. The Ilan overflows with references to the works of Chaim Vital. In the colophon, Hammerschlag claims that Vital's Ilan served as his model, but a single glance is enough to cast doubt on this claim. There are no concentric circles, no circular structure at all, hallmarks of Vital's diagrams. Hammerschlag's Adam Kadmon Ilan does not present a unified arboreal schema. Its form is genuinely unique in the history of the genre. After claiming to have copied Vital, Hammerschlag adds something far more revealing. This tree, unseen for generations, with its branches spread wide, Ezekiel 31:5. Fortunate is the eye that has seen its great power and magnificence. Here, at least, Hammerschlag speaks the truth. He had created an Ilan unlike any other. Even if Vital's Ilan was not truly his source, Hammerschlag's claim is understandable exaggeration, given that much of the content of his own Ilan was drawn from other Kabbalistic diagrams circulating in his environment, especially those associated with Shabtai Sheftel Horowitz, known as Popper's. It is admittedly not easy to recognize Popper's schematic face of Adam Kadmon in the almost caricature-like visage that peers out from the center of the first sheet of the rotulus. And yet, a closer examination of the inscriptions reveals a creative assimilation of Popper's sources fully integrated into a radically different framework of representation. Even literal quotations were subjected to Hammerschlag's interpretive intention. If one looks carefully at the head of his Adam Kadmon, the eyes, the eyebrows, the ears, one notices that right and left are reversed, according to Hammerschlag's own legends. The same inversion applies to the arms and the legs. Hammerschlag frequently cites the Midrash Re'uyot Elionot Halela, the nightly visions, which speaks of a great sage who created an Ilan in which the right and left sephirotic sides were reversed. Was Hammerschlag attempting to represent Adam Kadmon intersubjectively, as if seen from within, reflected in the divine gaze itself? This question deepens when we notice an additional anomaly of perspective. The rest of the diagram, even other parts of the head, is rendered according to conventional perspective, while the central face looks directly at the viewer. Hammerschlag also freely integrated tabular inscriptions and numerous handwritten comments, distributing them across the parchment with remarkable coherence. At the very top, crowning the entire structure, appears the unknown head, Reisha Delo Ityada, symbolizing the ineffable aspect of Adam Kadmon. Beneath the flared lower edge of the figure's doublet, filled with the triplets of the 72-letter divine name, a gloss appears that simply states, "Requires further consideration." The lower half of the second figure has been shifted downward, positioned just below the right hand of the figure above. Later, framing devices reveal clear affinities with a variant of Popper's diagram, similar to the magnificent Great Tree encountered earlier. Popper's simplified presentation of that still conventional Great Tree made it an ideal model for the new serpentine arrangement Hammerschlag devised. Both Ilanot also share the inclusion of the relatively uncommon Tree of Expanded Names, Ilan Hashemot Hamerubavim. In Hammerschlag's Ilan, now on the fourth of 5 parchment sheets, this module appears at the top of the second column and continues into the third. This serpentine design marked a radical departure from the page layout of its sources. In those earlier diagrams, columns maintained their integrity, center, right flank, left flank, from top to bottom, preserving the symbolic meaning of these positions within Kabbalistic theosophy. Hammerschlag did not abandon that symbolism. He preserved it within each column, while radically reorganizing the flow between them. Yet, these technical details should not distract from the primary vision, the audacious representation of Adam Kadmon itself. Its anthropomorphism finds a parallel in that same period only in the profile of Adam Kadmon appearing in figure 12 of Nor's fourth apparatus. Do these two strikingly human images of Adam Kadmon, both from the final quarter of the 17th century, share something deeper? The syncretists of Knorr's circle saw Adam Kadmon as Christ under another name. But who, or what, was Adam Kadmon for Hammerschlag? Hammerschlag's Adam Kadmon was a composite figure. First of all, he was a Habsburg emperor, from the imperial crown down to the curled mustache. The tripartite crown is clearly inspired by the solid gold crown created in 1601 by Jan Vermeyen in Prague, intended as the personal crown of Rudolf II. That crown, today preserved in the imperial treasury in Vienna, became a beloved symbol of monarchy for many Jewish subjects. Its presence can be seen across numerous Jewish ritual objects, Torah breastplates, ornamental finials for Torah scrolls, and Hanukkah lamps. Hammerschlag's Adam Kadmon also bears a striking resemblance to Leopold I, the reigning Holy Roman Emperor, born in 1640, ruling from 1658 until 1705. When Hammerschlag began work on his great Ilan, Leopold I had already occupied the throne for an entire generation and had become the iconic monarch of his age. modern Jewish historians tend to remember Leopold primarily for his consent to the expulsion of the Jews from Vienna in 1670. One might expect such an act to have disqualified him as an object of Jewish admiration, and yet his long reign, moments of benevolence toward Jewish communities, and his survival of the Ottoman threat during the 1680s all contributed to his transformation into a figure of fascination and even devotion. Secondly, Hammerschlag's Adam Kadmon was also Shabtai Tzvi, the mystical messiah of 1666. Nosen was just over 40 years old when the Sabbatean movement reached its peak during the 1660s. It is entirely possible that he took part in processions where printed portraits of Shabtai Tzvi were carried aloft, images that would have imprinted themselves deeply upon his inner imagination. Over time, those images may have fused with the popular icon of the Kabbalistic Messiah. The form of messianism associated with Shabtai Tzvi, both before and after his apostasy, rested on the extraordinary creative fluidity of Nathan of Gaza within Lurianic Kabbalah. Nathan's Lurianism was so eloquent that its heresies were often difficult to detect. Largely devoid of explicit references to Shabtai himself, Nathan's unusually poetic and emotionally powerful writings proved resilient enough to survive the collapse of the Messianic movement. In fact, many of his ideas were absorbed into what later came to be regarded as Orthodox Lurianic thought. Some Jews, however, maintained a private devotion to the mystical Messiah while awaiting his return. On what basis, then, can one claim that Hammerschlag's Adam Kadmon also refers to Shabtai Tzvi? Scholars have often labeled an author Sabbatean simply because they could find no other source for a startling teaching, a method that is deeply flawed. Does Hammerschlag's uninhibited anthropomorphism prove Sabbatean tendencies? Not necessarily. Anthropomorphism alone is not a reliable indicator. After all, Papiers had already drawn the head of Adam Kadmon decades before the emergence of Sabbateanism. Nathan of Gaza himself employed geometric and visual language similar to that found in Vital's manuscripts to diagram his cosmogonic innovations. And other Sabbatean thinkers openly rejected any corporealization of the divine. Anthropomorphism by itself proves nothing, and yet. A careful reading of the text of Hammerschlag's Ilan leaves little room for doubt. At the very top of the scroll, the tetragrammaton appears written in large hollow letters, filled with inscriptions and surrounded by others, positioned just beneath the title. Its rectangular decorative frame contains a small opening along the lower edge, leading directly to the jewel of the crown, cantor, here represented unmistakably as the Habsburg imperial crown, dominated by the initials of Ein Sof. Before addressing the surrounding inscriptions, we must understand the mystical significance of the crown itself. According to Nathan of Gaza, the messianic transformation consists in the elevation of Malkut, the lowest sephira, despite its associations with kingship, to the level of cantor, the crown. The divine name associated with cantor is Ehyed, I will be, revealed in Exodus 3:14. I will be who I will be, the first-person future form of the verb to be. Kabbalists traditionally associated this name with the supreme sephira, while the tetragrammaton was linked to Tiferet, the center, the beauty of the Holy One, blessed be he. In Hammerschlag's Ilan, however, the imperial crown seems to proclaim visually that Yahweh and Ein Sof are one and the same. Any initiate would immediately recognize this as an allusion to the Sabbatean secret of the inner God. That secret held that I am, Ehyeh, and he is, Yahweh, are ultimately the same being. In certain radical circles, this identification was taken almost literally, Shabtai Tzvi as the incarnation of the hidden God. This is why the subtitle of the scroll quotes And you, my son, know the God of your father, for Yahweh searches the hearts. 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 9. But there is yet another layer. Yahweh is also the name of the Messiah, crowned because he contains within himself the three worlds. As Nathan of Gaza wrote, "Is it not the task of the Messiah to rectify the lower worlds and to become the chariot of the light of life?" Therefore, his name is Yahweh, for he encompasses the chariot of the three worlds. Beneath this Yahweh, Hammerschlag placed a tiny annotation indicating the expanded form of the 72-letter divine name derived from Exodus chapter 14. This note, together with nearby inscriptions, suggests that the reader was meant to identify Shabtai Tzvi with divinity itself, a fusion that culminates in the final apotheosis, the man-god. Other allusions reinforce the same idea. Beneath the great tetragrammaton, a gloss mentions the name Shaddai, Eshti, whose numerical value, 314, equals that of Metatron, the prince of the countenance. But within the textual insinuations of the Ilan, Shaddai is further associated with Shabtai Tzvi through gematria wordplay. The three letters of Shaddai, Shin, Dalet, Yod, can be decomposed into three words, whose initials add up to exactly the same value as the name Shbati Tzvi. Thus, the name of God is transformed into the name of the Messiah. In the words of Nathan of Gaza, the manifestation of the light of the name Shaddai will be revealed through the King Messiah. Through him, the light of the ancient Holy One, Atika Kadisha, will become visible in Zeir Anpin, and thus the souls of this generation will be redeemed. Hammerschlag's visual language participates fully in this playful and provocative game, saturated with colors, symbols, and deliberately ambiguous citations. One exquisite example appears in the speech bubble beside the Habsburg face of Adam Kadmon. In Orot Hayim, page 12b, I found this, see to the right, and these are his words. In the parallel bubble to the right appears a supposed quotation linking the supreme lights of Adam Kadmon to the name Shabtai, presented as the axis of cosmic restoration, Tikkun. The preparatory codex for the scroll, perhaps confiscated by censors or by the notorious hunter of heresies, Rabbi Jacob Emden, contains passages that are even more explicit, combining the word Messiah, M-S-H-Y-H, with Kabbalistic formulas directly associated with Shabtai. Elsewhere in the Ilan, the references become more veiled. At the end of the second column, for example, a hierarchical list culminates in the figures father, mother, son, and daughter, the latter being the Sephirah, Malkut, glossed in red ink. She is called the orchard of the sacred apples, the field Sadeh. Above it, a wavy line underlines the word field, explaining it as equivalent to Shaddai, and therefore, once again, to Shabtai Tzvi. In a nearby column, an even more cryptic phrase appears. The fourth paragraph and its culmination. From here begin the 390 worlds. At first glance, this seems like a standard Kabbalistic teaching, but no such doctrine exists. The sages of the Mishnah spoke of 310 worlds that God will grant to the righteous. The number 390 is a subtle geometric update. It corresponds precisely to the numerical value of the letters Shin and Tzadi, the initials of Shabtai Tzvi. And moreover, S to Z was the traditional abbreviation for Shalaya Tzibur, the cantor of the congregation. Alongside this reference, a colophon records Hammerschlag's own office. I, Nosen Neta, cantor, appointed in the year 420, corresponding to 1660. One cannot help but wonder to what extent Hammerschlag's obsession with Shabtai Tzvi implied a personal identification with the divine Messiah. After all, both were cantors. Hammerschlag was a devoted Sabbatean, even though his work does not display an ideological structure derived directly from Nathan of Gaza. He likely remained unaware of Shabtai Tzvi's rejection of Lurianic Kabbalah. Despite his devotion, the Ilan of Adam Kadmon remains a thoroughly Lurianic cosmography, and Hammerschlag's other works reveal a sustained interest in the Kavanot, the mystical intentions of the Ari. In short, Shabtai Tzvi functioned as the emotional axis of a religious life that otherwise remained firmly within the traditional Kabbalistic framework. In this sense, Hammerschlag may be seen as a living example of the type described by Gershom Scholem when he spoke of Rabbi Mordecai Ashkenazi, a Zabbatian prophet born in Zolkio, whose dream notebook from the 1690s Scholem analyzed in one of his earliest studies. "We see in him," Scholem wrote, "the entire spiritual orientation of a true Hasid, for whom the appearance of Shabtai Tzvi was the decisive event of his inner life, while the world of halacha and the commandments remained fully intact." Ashkenazi recorded that the secret of divinity, Sod HaElokut, which he called Shiur Koma, was revealed to him by a visionary Maggid, and that he understood it by contemplating a drawing traced by the Maggid's own hand. In much the same way, through texts and images, Hammerschlag expressed his unwavering devotion to Shabtai Tzvi. Even the gematria of Shabtai's name filled him with rapture. His Ilan makes this devotion unmistakable in the fusion of Emperor Leopold I and King Messiah Shabtai within the figure of the divinized Adam Kadmon, the personal god of Nosen. Sabbatean iconography of the period often depicted Shabtai crowned and seated upon Solomon's throne. Hammerschlag, a generation after Shabtai's conversion in 1666 and his death in 1676, carried that image to its ultimate conclusion. He divinized him completely, and as audacious as this fantasy may seem, it was able to survive the death of the divine Messiah. His followers could continue living as Jews among Jews. Hammerschlag's vision, Shabtai Tzvi, as Messiah, Emperor, and Adam Kadmon, bears witness to a devotion that stubbornly refused to disappear. Scholem recalls that Shabtai often applied to himself the verse from 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 1, "The man raised on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob." An elderly Polish rabbi who knew him in 1666 discovered that the numerical value of that verse was identical to that of the phrase Shabtai Tzvi, God of Jacob. The great tree, reimagined by Hammerschlag, expressed precisely this equation. Yet the extraordinary Sabbatean figure of Adam Kadmon, created by Hammerschlag, does not undermine the strength of his commitment to Lurianic cosmology. On the contrary, it reveals the extent to which his religious imagination was capable of uniting two poles that others considered incompatible: the hieratic structure of the Ari's universe and the charismatic figure of the living Messiah, Shabtai Tzvi. It is precisely in this superposition of levels, theosophy, messianism, imperial politics, and personal experience, that the Ilan of Adam Kadmon achieves its most singular character. The scroll functions simultaneously as a cosmic map, a mystical portrait, a theological declaration, and a spiritual confession. It is not merely a diagram, it is an autobiography written in symbolic code, a self-portrait dissolved into the form of the primordial man. The result is an object that unsettles even those deeply familiar with the tradition of the Ilanot. No other Kabbalistic tree fused such disparate elements with comparable boldness: the figure of the Habsburg emperor, the iconography of Shabtai Tzvi, the serpentine structures of Poppers, the teachings of Hayim Vital, the mystical oscillations of Nathan of Gaza, the insinuated gematrias, the right-left inversions, the reinterpreted crown of Keter, and the tetragrammaton, now Yahweh, hinted at as both the name of the Messiah and the inner God. the combination may seem impossible. But in the 17th century, on the margins of the European Jewish world, the boundaries between the permitted and the forbidden, the orthodox and the heretical, were far from clear. Hammerschlag lived in a universe where manuscripts were copied by hand, where censorship could strike at any moment, where messianic rumors still pulsed through schools and synagogues, and where every symbol could conceal a dangerous declaration. The Ilan of Adam Kadmon is a child of that world, an artifact that absorbs the light of all its surroundings, refracts it, and transforms it into a vision that is at once orthodox and reckless, traditional and subversive, devout and radical. The Sabbatian elements that permeate the Ilan should not be seen as isolated deviations, but as revealing signs of the spirit of its time. After 1666, many Jews, without abandoning halakha or communal life, continued to see in Shabtai Tzvi a profound manifestation of divine mystery. For some, his apostasy was not a betrayal, but a hidden stage in the process of redemption. This cannot be understood through modern historical logic, but only through the mystical sensibility of the Jewish Baroque, where contradiction could coexist without scandal. Hammerschlag's case is paradigmatic. The Adam Kadmon he draws is simultaneously the primordial man of Lurianic Kabbalah, Emperor Leopold I, the Messiah Shabtai Tzvi, and, on a more intimate level, Nosen Neta himself, the cantor of the community, the man whose spiritual life orbited the messianic mystery. The secret of the Ilan lies in the union of these figures. The question is not which identity is the true one. The power of the symbol lies in containing them all. The Ilan does not seek to define, it seeks to embody. For this reason, even in its visual structure, the scroll resists conventional patterns. There are no concentric circles, as in the diagrams of Vital. There is no single unified vertical tree. What we find instead is a serpent of columns that stretches and twists across the parchment, as if divine light itself were struggling to find a body in which to dwell. In its torsions and displacements, Hammerschlag's Ilan literally embodies the Lurianic drama of contraction, rupture, and restoration. It is the universe attempting to reassemble itself after the Shevirat HaKelim, light trapped, seeking a vessel that will not shatter, but it is also a meditation on the state of European Jewry after the earthquake of 1666. The rupture caused by Shabtai Tzvi left communities vulnerable, scattered, wounded. In that broken world, the figure of Adam Kadmon, part emperor, part messiah, part Kabbalist, part cantor, emerges as a desperate attempt to restore order, to reimagine unity. That is why the figure is not cold or abstract. It has a face, it has eyes, it has a mustache, it has a crown, it is a body. And that body is political, mystical, messianic, and personal. The fusion of Adam Kadmon with Emperor Leopold I is not arbitrary. In a world where imperial power determined the life or death of Jewish communities, imagining the emperor as the primordial man was not flattery, it was theurgy. It was a way of inscribing political power into divine history, of symbolically domesticating it, of transforming it into an instrument of tikkun. In the same way, associating that imperial body with the name of Shabtai Tzvi, a figure who embodied, for his followers, the mystery of evil, transmuted into redemption, allowed Hammerschlag to unite two axes of Jewish destiny, external power, represented by the emperor, and internal power, embodied by the hidden Messiah. Thus, the Ilan of Adam Kadmon becomes an attempt at an impossible synthesis, to unite the throne of Vienna with the throne of Solomon, the body of the emperor with the body of the Messiah, the name of Ein Sof with the expanded name of 72 letters, and political hope with eschatological hope. And all of this unfolds not in a theoretical treatise, but in a scroll, in a drawing, on the living surface of parchment. It is art, but it is also liturgy. It is cosmology, but it is also prayer. It is mysticism, but it is also memory. Hammerschlag's insistence on Adam Kadmon as the axis of the universe does not merely follow the teaching of the Ari, it intensifies it. Luria taught that Adam Kadmon is the first form taken by divine light after contraction, a body of light, not a human body. Hammerschlag makes him human. He turns him into political flesh, messianic flesh, historical flesh. This act is not innocent. To humanize Adam Kadmon is to draw the divine closer to the world. It is to suggest that revelation is not only transcendent, but incarnated, historical. It is to imply that redemption is not confined to the upper worlds, but unfolds within empire, synagogue, music, and the life of the cantor himself. For this reason, the Ilan is also a spiritual self-portrait. Not a portrait of Nosen Neta as an individual, but of the kind of soul he embodied, a soul that lives between worlds, that believes in the immanence of mystery, that hears in the liturgy the echo of the Messiah, that sees in symbols the possibility of unifying what has been scattered. Read this way, the scroll is not a map of the cosmos. It is a confession, a prayer drawn by hand, a testimony of unwavering devotion. Hammerschlag's devotion is expressed not only in what the scroll says, but in what it withholds, in its insinuations, in its inversions, in the way divine names intertwine with human names. The presence of Shabtai Tzvi is never always explicit, yet it is everywhere, like an underground current running through the entire work. The identification of Adam Kadmon with the Sabbatean Messiah is not accidental. It is a deeply theological statement, carefully encoded. The interplay of names, gematrias, crowns, titles, and spatial positions leads to an unavoidable conclusion. For Hammerschlag, Shabtai Tzvi was not a failed historical figure, but the key to the divine mystery itself. In this key, Adam Kadmon becomes the ultimate form of the Messiah, and the Messiah becomes the visible form of the inner God. Such an interpretation would have been unacceptable in most 17th century Jewish contexts, but the Ilan presents it symbolically, encrypted, shielded by the complexity of its design. Hammerschlag knew his ideas were dangerous. Sabbatean persecution was still active. Censors were vigilant. Rabbis were alert. Even copying a text by Nathan of Gaza could arouse suspicion. That is why the Ilan never proclaims openly what it believes. It insinuates. It hides in plain sight. It weaves its secret into form, inversion, column, name, and number. An initiate could read it. A censor could not. The result is a work that performs two opposite functions at once. It protects its author, and it reveals his soul. Adam Kadmon thus becomes a palimpsest of identities, the primordial man of Lurianic Kabbalah, Emperor Leopold, the Messiah Shabtai, the cantor Nosen Neta, and finally the inner God, Ein Sof, manifest in history. This superposition makes the Ilan unclassifiable. It is Lurianic, yet Sabbatean, imperial, yet heretical, deeply personal, yet universal. It is an object of study and an object of devotion. Its most radical originality lies not in its serpentine form, nor in its columns, nor even in its hybrid iconography, but in its implicit theology, the idea that Adam Kadmon is not merely a cosmological figure, but the visible embodiment of the hidden mystery, the point where all dimensions of existence converge. In this sense, the Ilan is not just a Kabbalistic diagram. It is a metaphysical declaration, an attempt to show that human history, with its emperors, its messiahs, its failures, and its hopes, is inscribed at the very heart of divinity itself. And so, the Ilan becomes a mirror, a reflection of how Hammerschlag saw the world, and how he saw himself, not as a mere copyist or interpreter, but as someone standing at a crucial point in the cosmic drama. Someone who waited, fearfully and trembling, for the return of the Messiah he had known in his youth. The Ilan does not end with closure. It ends with an opening, a threshold, and that threshold remains open, waiting for the reader to decide whether to remain outside or to step into the body of the primordial man and let the light pass through. And it is precisely at this point where Adam Kadmon concentrates the infinite expansion of the name that the scroll ceases to be a diagram and becomes a crossroads, a kind of frontier between worlds, the world of form and the world of light, the world of history and the world of myth, the world of human beings and the world of emanations. For if the Ilan makes anything clear, it is this: there is no such thing as a pure Adam Kadmon. Every representation of the primordial man is inevitably shaped by the gaze of the one who imagines him. Vital imagined him as circles, Poppers as a schematic head, Nor as Christ rendered in hermetic form, and Hammerschlag as a messianic emperor permeated by Kabbalah. That is his audacity. He does not attempt to erase history in order to reach the divine. He reveals the divine within history itself. This is why his Adam Kadmon is filled with folds, contradictions, and visual deviations. The figure is too human to be celestial, and too celestial to be human, too political to be purely mystical, and too mystical to be merely political. It is in this tension that its power lives. Hammerschlag understood, perhaps better than his teachers, that mystery does not manifest in purity, but in mixture. That tikkun is not the restoration of a simple order, but the integration of opposites. That light does not descend only from above, but also rises from fracture. For this reason, the Adam Kadmon of the scroll is not static. He appears to move, almost to twist, following the serpentine motion of the columns. It is a body in process, a breathing silhouette, a map of a soul still unfinished. The reader who contemplates the scroll senses, without necessarily being able to explain it, that this body is alive, that there is a tremor in its eyes, that its mustache and crown are masks concealing something else, that what looks out from the parchment is neither emperor, nor messiah, nor Kabbalist, but a presence that does not belong to a single world. Perhaps that is why Hammerschlag chose the format of the Rotulus, the continuous scroll, instead of a bound codex. The scroll is a river. It cannot be stopped on a single page. It cannot be reduced to an isolated folio. Everything flows. Everything connects. Everything unfolds without interruption. Like light. Like the name. Like destiny itself. In this flow, Adam Kadmon appears as the first whirlpool, the place where the infinite light of Ein Sof coils in order to become world. And within that coiling, Hammerschlag inserts his own time, his own people, his own Messiah. The result is a cosmos in which nothing is out of place, neither the Emperor, nor Shabtai Tzvi, nor the dreams of Nosen Neta, nor the upper worlds, nor the Sephirot, nor the expanded names. Everything finds its place within the primordial body. Everything has a root. Everything has a spark. And perhaps that is the ultimate message of the Ilan, that there is no fracture that cannot be integrated, and no fall that cannot be illuminated, no shadow that does not contain a glimmer of the infinite.
At this stage, the Ilan no longer allows the reader to remain a detached observer. The scroll begins to exert a kind of gravitational pull. It does not invite contemplation from a safe distance, it demands involvement. The moment one believes a stable interpretive pattern has been found, the diagram folds back on itself, bends and opens in another direction. The serpentine structure disrupts any simple logic of top and bottom and forces the reader to think in spirals, currents, and rhythms rather than linear sequences. This rhythm is not accidental. It mirrors the breathing of the Lurianic cosmos itself. Contraction and expansion, concealment and revelation, descent and ascent. The entire scroll pulses with this movement, almost as if it were a living organism rather than a static object. Within this pulse, Adam Kadmon is not the final point of the diagram, but its first heartbeat. Everything that follows, the columns, the glosses, the divine names, the permutations and tables, functions like organs and vessels, distributing the light that emanates from the primordial face. Hammerschlag understood that a diagram of creation could not be static. Even when fixed on parchment, it had to imply motion. It had to suggest that what the viewer sees is only a frozen instant within a reality that is continuously transforming. For this reason, the serpentine form of the Ilan is not an aesthetic whim, but a theological statement. Creation is not a straight line, but a circuit, an endless movement, a dance. Just as the cosmos moves, so too does history. The inclusion of the emperor is not ornamental or merely contextual. It asserts that European history, with its wars, kingdoms, expulsions, and crowns, belongs to the same cosmic movement. Political power is not external to the divine drama, but one of its stages. This is why the face of Adam Kadmon is recognizable and historical rather than abstract. Mystery becomes a face. The face becomes a map. The map becomes a world. Hammerschlag, as both musician and mystic, understood that a symbol only functions when it vibrates on multiple levels simultaneously. His Adam Kadmon vibrates on at least four: the cosmological level of divine emanation, the theosophical level of sephirotic structure, the messianic level centered on Shabtai Tzvi, and the historical level embodied by Emperor Leopold I. The superposition of these planes generates a tension that remains palpable even in modern reproductions of the scroll. The energy of the Ilan does not reside in its colors or figures alone, but in the controlled collision of meanings. This collision produces a subtle unease. The scroll does not merely describe a cosmos, it feels like a fragment of the cosmos itself, a micro-universe that beats in rhythm with Ein Sof. This may explain why Hammerschlag filled the Ilan with such dense layers of annotation, as though he could not bear to leave anything uninscribed, fearing that a single unnamed spark might allow the universe to fracture once again. The glosses surrounding Adam Kadmon seem to whisper instructions and warnings. Remember this. Do not forget that. Pay attention here. This name expands, that one contracts. This number conceals a secret, and that secret conceals a world. To the attentive reader, these glosses function like miniature Magadim, inner voices or messengers, echoes of a discourse that never quite reaches closure. They are fissures in the text through which light escapes. It is this light, the light of mystery, that sustains the entire scroll. Without it, the parchment would be nothing more than a curious artifact. With it, the Ilan becomes an act of cosmic devotion, a prayer offered not to a single congregation, but to the universe itself. Hammerschlag seems to have drawn it in the hope that some future reader, perhaps only one, might feel what he felt while creating it. Yet the intuition seems to go further. The future reader, Hammerschlag appears to suggest, would not merely read the scroll, but would continue it. The Ilan is not a closed document. It is an invitation. It functions as a bridge extended toward those who, centuries later, still attempt to decipher the subterranean current that runs through the history of Israel, the kingdoms of the world, and the human heart. At some level, Hammerschlag must have known that his work was too personal for his own generation and too dangerous for his contemporaries. At the same time, he trusted that mystery operates on a different timescale than empires, that light is patient, and that true secrets know how to wait. This is why the Ilan seems oriented less toward its present than toward an unknown future. It is addressed not only to scholars, but to souls who still remember, without necessarily knowing how, that history contains invisible folds, that infinite light slips through any crack, and that heresies are sometimes truths spoken before their time. This orientation toward the future explains the almost prophetic, visionary tone of the scroll. It is not the didactic voice of a manual, nor the ascetic voice of a treatise. It is the vibrating voice of someone who is seeing something that does not yet exist, something in the process of being born, something pushing from within. That something is Adam Kadmon as a living messianic figure, not a concept, not a symbol, not an archetype, but a presence. That presence permeates every gloss, every inversion, every serpentine line. It refuses to remain a description of creation and instead demands participation in it. This demand is what transforms the reader. The Ilan cannot be approached with academic detachment. It pulls the reader in, seizes attention, and makes one part of the drama. Suddenly, the reader is no longer merely an observer of Adam Kadmon, but becomes one of the vessels, one of the organs of the primordial body, one of the internal columns of the scroll, a point through which light must pass or shatter. In this way, the Ilan reveals that mysticism is not a system, but a transmission, a contagion that passes from soul to soul, from letter to letter, from world to world. This transmission explains the most intimate level of the work, the level at which the cantor Nosen Neta, with his pen and parchment, is not only drawing God, but drawing himself. He is not merely mapping the cosmos. He is tracing his own spiritual pulse. He is not only inscribing divine names, he is inscribing his own wounds. Every written name, every permutation, every numerical value, every reference to Shabtai, every crown, every inversion, every serpentine curve is also an element of self-portraiture. Not a physical portrait, though the Habsburg moustache betrays something, but a portrait of the way Hammerschlag inhabited the world, as though the entire universe were a single secret text that might one day be deciphered. Seen in this light, the Ilan of Adam Kadmon becomes a meditation on human fragility, on what it means to live in an era when a messianic promise ignited like a flame and was then suddenly extinguished, on what it means to continue believing after almost everything has been lost, on what it means to carry a secret that could destroy you and yet entrust it to Parchment because life without it would be impossible. The greatness of the scroll lies precisely in this oscillation between strength and vulnerability. It is a powerful work, but also a deeply wounded one. There is something broken and luminous at its core, something that does not attempt to hide its fractures. Perhaps this is why the gaze of Adam Kadmon, the frontal, direct, almost challenging gaze, feels alive. It is as though it were asking the reader a question. What will you do with this mystery? Will you face it, or will you look away? That question, buried at the center of the scroll, does not demand an immediate answer. It lingers, suspended like a theurgic echo, waiting for the reader to decide whether to step into the primordial body or remain outside, contemplating the serpent from a distance. If the reader chooses to enter, if the threshold is truly crossed, something unexpected occurs. The Ilan no longer functions merely as a mirror in which Adam Kadmon is contemplated. It becomes a mirror in which the reader encounters himself. At the moment the symbolic boundary is crossed, one is caught within the same web of correspondences that structures the scroll. The reader becomes part of the diagram, another internal column, another gloss, another name that must expand or contract according to the movement of the soul. At that point, the Ilan seems to begin reading the reader in return. It reflects back shadows, searches, certainties, contradictions, it reveals that the mystery of Adam Kadmon does not reside outside the observer, but within. The ruptures depicted on Parchment are no longer only cosmological, they become emotional and existential. The lights represented are not only theosophical structures, but lived intensities. The primordial body is nothing other than the human condition rendered at cosmic scale. This is why the Ilan moves so deeply. It is impossible to contemplate it without sensing that one is made of the same folds and fractures of the same fragile material suspended between chaos and restoration. What Hammerschlag achieves, with an almost ruthless delicacy, is to take the Lurianic drama of contraction, rupture, and tikkun, and inscribe it within the texture of lived experience. The scroll becomes a reminder that every division, fear, fall, hope, mourning, desire, memory, faith, was already present in the first gesture of Ein Sof when it made room for the world. The Ilan, therefore, does not offer consolation in the simple sense. It does not promise that everything will be repaired quickly or cleanly. Instead, it insists that repair is a process that unfolds within brokenness, that light persists precisely where vessels have failed. In this way, the primordial body becomes a pedagogy of endurance, a way of learning how to inhabit fracture without abandoning the possibility of meaning. The presence of the tree of expanded names in the later sections of the scroll reinforces this intuition. The divine name does not resolve into a single form. It proliferates endlessly. Each permutation opens another world. Each world contains another possibility of the mystery. Hammerschlag places this expansion at the heart of the Ilan to suggest that neither truth nor redemption ever reaches a final closed state. Both remain open, generative, unfinished. Adam Kadmon stands at the center of this proliferation, not as a static figure, but as a living axis. Everything converges upon him, yet he himself is unstable, composite, and ambiguous. This ambiguity is essential. In Lurianic Kabbalah, Adam Kadmon is not a completed being, but a process. The first configuration taken by infinite light as it enters time and space. Hammerschlag radicalizes this idea by giving Adam Kadmon a historical face, a political body, and a messianic charge. In doing so, he affirms that history itself is one of the arenas in which divine light struggles to take form. The direct gaze of the figure reinforces this claim. Adam Kadmon does not look away, he looks back. The encounter is reciprocal. To see the primordial man is already to be seen by him. This reciprocity echoes a fundamental Zoharic intuition. Contemplation is never one-sided. The face of the human being reflects the face of God, and the face of God reflects the face of the human being. In the Ilan, this teaching becomes visual and unavoidable. Placed beneath the imperial crown, this gaze acquires an additional layer of tension. The emperor, as imagined in the 17th century, embodied worldly order and authority. By inscribing that face into Adam Kadmon, Hammerschlag collapses the distance between political power and cosmic structure. He suggests that sovereignty itself, however distorted or violent, participates in the divine drama. This does not sanctify power in a simplistic way, rather, it subjects power to the logic of tikkun. Even empire is drawn into the work of repair. For a modern reader, this fusion of theology and politics may feel disturbing. For Hammerschlag, it was a symbolic necessity. Redemption could not occur in a purely spiritual vacuum. It had to unfold within the concrete realities of imperial rule, communal vulnerability, and historical trauma. The Ilan is thus also a meditation on Jewish life in 17th century Europe, a world marked by expulsions, censorship, fear, and precarious survival. In that context, the Sabbatean figure of Shabtai Tzvi assumes its full meaning. His rise, collapse, and disappearance are reinterpreted not as a failure of history, but as a movement within the divine process itself. Descent becomes part of restoration. Apostasy becomes concealment. The Messiah's fall mirrors the breaking of the vessels. For Hammerschlag, the light did not vanish in 1666. It went underground. The Ilan preserves this conviction in coded form. It does not declare it openly, but embeds it in numbers, names, crowns, inversions, and spatial arrangements. The scroll becomes a shelter for a forbidden hope, a way of keeping faith with the mystery without exposing oneself to destruction. In this sense, the Ilan is not only a theological statement, but an act of spiritual self-preservation. This is why the work resists closure. It does not end with a conclusion, but with an opening. It leaves the reader suspended at a threshold, confronted with a choice. One may remain outside, analyzing the serpent from a safe distance, or one may step inside, accepting the risk of being transformed by what the diagram sets in motion. Hammerschlag seems to have known that his true audience would not be his contemporaries, but readers yet to come. He trusted that the mystery would find its way to those capable of bearing it. The Ilan is therefore oriented toward the future, toward a time when its layered meanings could be approached without immediate danger, yet still with existential seriousness. In the end, the Ilan of Adam Kadmon is not simply a historical artifact or a Kabbalistic curiosity. It is an experience. It confronts the reader with the possibility that history, politics, theology, and personal life are not separate domains, but interwoven dimensions of a single cosmic process. It asks whether one is willing to recognize oneself as part of that process, as a vessel that may crack, but through which light nevertheless passes. This is the final gesture of the scroll. It does not offer answers. It offers participation. And in doing so, it fulfills its deepest intention, not to explain the universe, but to draw the reader into the living drama of creation, rupture, and repair.